like to welcome our listeners to our inaugural season of QG Connect. My name is Bharat Shari, and QG Connect is where we interview industry leaders on their perspectives around data governance and which phase of the data governance journey that their organization might be on. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome Todd Henley, Data Governance Strategy and Architecture Manager at Northwest Bank. Welcome to QG Connect, Todd.
Oh, thank you very much, Bharat. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to a conversation today. And so, for our listeners, I just wanted to provide a little bit of a background about who we are at who DataQG is before we launch into the interview. So, first and foremost, we are a resource platform for organizations, no matter which stage of your data governance journey you're on. So, all resources on our platform are provided by our members, who include CIOs, CTOs, practitioners, and content creators within the space, and who are spread out across 60 countries. And so our entire business is built around building or bringing people together as a global community under one virtual roof. So having said that, let's first launch into the interview today. So thanks again for taking the time to meet today, Todd. And to help us get started, I was wondering if you could maybe share your thoughts on what Northwest Bank does and what your role at Northwest Bank is, if you don't mind.
Oh, great. Northwest Bank is a small to medium-sized banking system throughout the Northeast. We have 170 branches throughout Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, Indiana. It's again a small, medium-sized bank, but it's a full-service bank. So we have pretty much all the services that you would expect from a bank. We've gone into the digital space. So we are as competitive as most banks are, of course, in that space. It is small. It's been around for 110 years, so it has a lot of history, a lot of legacy. It just moved its holdings company to the Columbus, Ohio area within the last year or so. I was brought on board, 4 or 5 months ago. So I am still relatively new to Northwest, but happy to be there.
Excellent. And at Northwest Bank, Todd, what sort of KPIs are you managing, or maybe if you could talk about the projects and the teams that you're leading, that would be really great.
Sure, great. So I lead the strategy, governance, and architecture team. This is very similar to teams that I've built at other organizations. The reason that we're all put together into one organization is because we really need to understand the direction that the business is going in, to be able to understand how data applies to and can help us to reach our strategic goals and objectives. So really, from a data strategy standpoint, you have to understand what are your organizational strategic goals and objectives, and then what are the business capabilities that are designed to help you reach those goals and objectives, right? And each business capability has some understanding of the decisions that they need to make to reach those goals and objectives, the questions they need to answer to make those decisions. And all those questions require data, to get those answers, right? So as you get that understanding, you have to define, okay, what is the data capability that we need to provide the organization? Is it master data management? Is it a CRM? Is it reference data management? Is it an enterprise data warehouse or a data lake, or some fundamental data capability that you need to build for the company, to support that business capability. So that's where governance and architecture really comes in, because we have to define, okay, is that data really the right data that the company needs to answer those questions, make those decisions, make that business capability really function, and able to reach our strategic goals and objectives. Is it the right data? Is it of the right quality? Is it business ready? Is it of the right format? Are we getting to that data to the right people on at the right time? And architecture is there to decide, to help us decide, okay, what are the right standards for that data? Do we have the right tools and technologies? Is it accessible to everyone? Do we have the right standards for formatting? So that's why it's all linked into one group as, kind of formatting, a data pipeline. So from our team, it goes into, advanced integrations. So if we do need something like a data warehouse or a data lake or a lake house, as we're, you know, uh, creating nowadays, um, you know, from advanced integrations, it goes into insights development. So from insights development, it's, at first, business intelligence and reporting, what's happening now, give me a dashboard, some picture, to show me what's happening now. What is the reporting that's required for FDIC, or for any other regulator that we have some reporting obligation to. um, and then from there it goes on to, for further insights development, such as, advanced analytics, data science, and so forth. So, we really are kind of the support structure for data as it comes into that pipeline and through that pipeline and back to our consumers, and ensuring that that data is what it is that they need to, support their business capability.
No, I think there's
So
a lot to, sorry, I know I was going to say there's a lot to unpack there, or I know you sort of
great.
walked through like a lot of different areas, and I'd love to unpack that a little bit maybe further along in our conversation.
Sure.
But before we get there, I was wondering, I mean, if you take a step back and think
Mhm.
about what made you or what interested you about data governance in the first place, what would, I mean, why did you get into this area maybe at the beginning of your career?
Oh, I got into data governance many years ago at a global not-for-profit. As an organization that manages metadata. It also writes software for libraries, for everything for patron support to back office support. Um, and the software that was being written was supported by all the metadata. So you could go to any library in the world and you would be able to find whatever type of material that you were looking for. Great company, great mission. And I noticed that there were things that could possibly have been made better, right? There are a lot of people there who, were incredibly smart, gifted, talented. But I noticed that there were some things that, we could possibly do a little bit better. One, to reduce some costs in the application of that metadata, the management of that metadata. So I really got interested in data governance in kind of a very focused way, meaning I intended to do it. There are multiple paths to get into data governance. Quite often, what you see is that a lot of people that get into data governance got into it, quite by accident. They got a battlefield commission. They said, "Hey, you've got a trigger finger. We need somebody to start a data governance program. Read a book," right? That's the way a lot of people get into data governance. Fewer people get into data governance intentionally. I'd heard about it, and it's like, I'm going to do some research on this. Did as much reading as I could. Started a data governance program. Very shaky at the start, because that's just the way these things work. A lot of things that I'd learned, when starting my first data governance program. The first data governance program that was built was at that not-for-profit. It was really for, one, for making sure that we could manage some of our costs in managing some of our metadata. But then it turned into, we had some regulatory obligations. We knew that we were going to be required to become FedRAMP certified, and we knew that we were going to become we were going to fall under GDPR, right? So we knew that was going to happen. So we took that data governance program and we rolled it into a data governance program that was more geared toward data privacy, data protection and privacy, right? So, the things that I learned along the way were, at least when I first started, was, data governance means a lot of things to a lot of people, and you're not going to get everyone on the same page. Try to keep it as simple as possible. For me, the way I define data governance is, a framework for making and executing decisions designed to provide business ready data. Right? It's very simple, it's very straightforward, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack. You have to bring an organization along, slowly. Sometimes they don't see the the forward motion, the forward momentum that they would like to see at that time. And also, just because you're ready doesn't mean the organization is ready, right? Just because you know what it is that needs to be done doesn't mean that the organization is going to. So you need to lead people to that, at least those that are willing, and build from there. I left that company, went to one of the largest utilities in North America, an electrical utility, Fortune 200 company, provided electricity to what was it, like 50 million people in 7 states, 11 service territories, through 7 operating companies, 20,000 employees and contractors. Much different ballgame. But at least that they knew that there was something that they needed to do, right? They knew that they needed to build a data governance program. One of the things that I learned from that experience was funding is important. And it's not just important for your program, it's important for how the company operates in general, right? So if you're in an organization that needs to capitalize every outlay of cash, then it's going to be very difficult to get data work done, right? So I built a team at that utility that was very much the same as what I'm building at Northwest right now. So it included data strategy, data governance, data stewardship, data quality management, metadata management, and data architecture all in one team. There were some rocky moments in that, but building was successful, and the team operates still today, now that I'm no longer there. So that's a good legacy when you can leave and everything still works.
No, definitely. I mean, and I know that having that experience across multiple industries, like you said, that sort of brings another sort of, it helps you put another lens to the program you're building, because what you build, for example, what you're building at Northwest, for example, may not be exactly the same as what you've done in your previous organizations. So no, that definitely, I mean, it's very interesting to hear. And I'm curious, in terms of maybe the drivers for data governance that you've seen within your sector, or maybe your previous experiences. Have you seen the same sort of drivers or similar drivers, or is it more nuanced in the case of, let's say, FinServ versus the utilities industry?
Yeah, it's in essence, when you're building a data governance program, and actually as you're building any program in any business whatsoever, even not for profit, it always comes down to 3 categories, for pretty much everything, right? And this is not some sort of deep insight, but it's true. You're either trying to save money, make money, or treat risk. That's really all you're trying to do. Those are your major drivers. But for each industry and for each organization in each industry, the balance between what you need to do, to, make money, save money, or treat risk is a little different. It's nuanced. For a not-for-profit, making money is of course important. You're never safe from market realities, right? But making money is really kind of a secondary concern as it is to, making sure that your costs are contained, that you're operating, the best way that you can for your community that you're serving, providing them the best services, the best data for those services, um, and ensuring that you are, maintaining, an organization that is secure, your data is protected, your patrons' privacy is protected, you're maintaining, regulatory standards, to the best of, your organization's capabilities. So yeah, I mean that's the right mix for that type of organization, in that type of industry. In the utilities industry, yeah, making money is really important, right? The more profitable you are as an organization, providing the service that you can, even though that your cost per, kilowatt hour is regulated. It's by tariff, by a local tariff, right? There's an agreement that you are going to charge this much for this much electricity, for you're going to charge X amount for Y amount of energy, right? Um, so pretty much how much you're going to make depending on your demand. Now your costs, of course, you have to keep very very tight control over your costs. um, and there are a lot of different areas that you need to control that cost. So in some ways, the cost of maintaining each customer record or each account, what is the cost for servicing each one of those customers? What's the cost of servicing each call? So that goes to, how do you define a customer? How do you define a residential customer versus a commercial customer versus small industry, large industry? How do you define a transmission customer? And how do you service all of them and maintain all of their customer records? How do you maintain your metering data so that you know how much you're providing to each customer location over a period of time? And then, of course, there are all the regulatory concerns that you would have for utility industry. So the balance is really more toward regulatory protection, making sure that you're you know servicing all of your regulatory obligations, and that you're servicing your customer the best way and the most cost-effective way that you possibly can. In a bank, it's very much the same way. You're trying to improve your revenue opportunities by providing the customer with the best services for that customer, making sure that they're in the right financial products for their particular needs. And of course, you have to you know service your regulatory obligations at the same time. And you have to, the banks operate on trust, right? So your customers need to trust your institution. You need to treat their data in the most trustworthy, transparent way that you possibly can. So it's the same mix, for every industry. You may just look at things a little bit differently for each one and each organization in each industry.
I think that's a great sort of an overview of the different industries you've worked in, Todd. And yeah, I completely hear you. I mean, the drivers may seem very simple, but ultimately it's very similar to the drivers that you have in each of these industries. And so you have to figure out where your business priorities are, and so that I think allows the business stakeholders to sort of uh, realize the value of data governance. And I'm curious. I mean, from your experiences, does that sort of top-down approach work better, or do you think more of a bottoms-up approach works better in terms of not just uh, clarifying the need for a data governance program, but also to launch it and maybe uh, to sort of track the progress that you make for, let's say, a program that you get off the ground?
Yeah, there's been a lot of ink spilled, and there have been um, several battles that have been fought over, best what's the best way to do it. And I'm more of a pragmatist in this regard. Top down, bottom up, middle out. It's whatever way is going to work for your organization. Fortunately, I've had both the fortune and misfortune of starting it multiple different ways, right? At first, it was a bottom up approach. That's the way that it worked. I made the business case for having a data governance program, and started it, from a business case, from a bottom up perspective. Actually, there was some work that I was already doing. Said, look, if we continue on this and we support it, we will get we will get X benefit from it. And that worked great. And then it turned into, oh, look, we've got some regulatory obligations coming up. And this is a perfect opportunity, for, more top-down support for that. Okay, that's great. In utilities, it was very much a middle out proposition. There was an internal audit done of one of the business units, and it found that it was performing analytics, but the question was asked, can we really trust the results of the analytics and the decisions that we're making, based on data that may be less than trustworthy? Plus, do we know that we're making decisions that aren't unfairly impacting, any demographic, right? So, it's not that there were really ethical concerns, but it was more of a, we probably should look at this at some point and say, can we really trust this data? Can we trust the decisions that we're making on it? So it started middle out, but then it became okay, so how are we handling, our SOX, reporting? How are we handling our 10Ks, 10Q reports? Do we really trust, the answers that we're getting, because we're getting different answers from different parts of the organization? Let's make sure that we're doing the right thing, and reporting, completely accurately, and making sure that the reports are properly valued, right? So then it became supported top down. Um, but at Northwest, it's a top down, uh, almost entirely, because it is supported by, there are FDIC regulations that require us to have a data governance program. So as we grow as an institution, that will be looked upon much more favorably, as an organization, that we have started this data governance journey. Um, it's not perfect. Nothing ever is perfect, but it's operational, in a very short period of time. And it has, full support from our board on down, right? So it works all different ways. Starting it depends on your organizational situation. And if I were to give advice to anybody, don't turn down any support that you can possibly get, even if it's from the bottom. If that's the way that you're going to start it that way. Show the value. If it starts middle out, and that's where the support is, start there, show the value, and from top down, the same thing, right? Start it there, show the value, and then continue and build onto your program.
I think that's great advice, Todd. I mean, One thing, I know we've heard from uh, other leaders whom we've interviewed and conversations we've had is that while the need for data governance that has become more clear in the last few years, that awareness that you mentioned in terms of how it plays a critical role when you, let's say, you're trying to build ML or AI models, and how do you
Mhm.
then the question that you asked or you got asked, I think was a great one. Like, how do we know that the data that we're relying on can be trusted, and how do we eliminate those that biases in the data? I think that that aspect of how data governance plays a critical role in these other initiatives, I think that's not yet at least very apparent to most organizations. I know some are, but I think for the majority, that's the feedback we've been hearing at least.
Right.
Uh,
And they,
yeah.
yeah, and some organizations, even after you start your data governance journey, and you may have a successful program in operation, many of your leaders may still not get it. They may still not understand it. That's why you need to, continually communicate, show your metrics, show how it's impacting their KPIs. When you show that, they start to get it. They may not understand all the nuts and bolts, and they don't have to. It's a service that you're providing to the organization. If you can show how you're impacting their KPIs, how you're moving their needles, then they're completely on board.
No, that's great advice as well. I think that way you're directly showing how you're adding value and why data quality, for example, when it comes to, let's say, marketing data, is critical for your business to succeed. So that's great advice, Todd. One other question I was going to ask you was in terms of uh, data governance, the area itself. As you probably know this better than I do, it's a very sort of an opinionated space, and so there's many frameworks, many sort of solutions, vendors in this sort of arena. So what are your thoughts around maybe those different aspects? Do you think that it makes sense to have like one standard or one framework that different organizations can just plug and execute, or maybe is it more customized depending on your organization and your team and what KPIs you're trying to try?
Yeah, I w- I would love there to be some standardization. I would love things to work the same way wherever you go, but that's not realistic. There are some things that can be standardized, certainly, and we should standardize what can be. Um, the reality is that every organization is different, and there are a lot of different perspectives on data governance. From developing operating models to frameworks, um, eh, but what's really required of somebody who is managing a data governance program is a little bit of mental flexibility, and this is something that I've kind of talked my data governance analysts through, is that as you're doing research on data governance, as you're studying um, the fundamentals of data governance, and what it is, and how it's supposed to operate, maintain some mental flexibility, because you're going to read things that may make sense in your context, and there may be some things that just don't make a lot of sense. There may be some things that you agree with that you may disagree with. um, if you're on one side, you may say that, oh well, we're already doing data governance to some degree, we just have to formalize it and make sure that all the roles and responsibilities are laid out and people know that that is what it is that they're doing. It's like, okay, that's great, that may work in certain circumstances, and it may actually work in all circumstances, but you have to also take into consideration, if you're not there to change things, then why are you there? If you're not there to change the way the organization operates, then there's really no reason for you to be there at all. There's no reason to have a data governance program. Why are you there? you need to show some sort of improvement in your data outcomes. And quite often, the majority of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, poor data outcomes have absolutely nothing to do with technology. There may be technology components that didn't stop people from doing the wrong thing, with data or inputting data improperly, but that's more of a technology control that is applied to a business process. And business processes are made up of people, and of course technologies that support them. So it's the overwhelming majority of the time, poor data outcomes are a people and process issue. It's not a technology issue. So, while I would love for there to be a standard way to implement data governance, no matter what your circumstances are, that is just entirely unrealistic. So, you need to maintain some semblance of mental flexibility on the entire concept of data governance and look at what your business is trying to do. Where are they trying to go? What data are they trying to use to get there? And how is it defined, produced, and consumed? And then say, okay, do we have the right data going to the right people at the right time to make the right decisions, right? So that's a Bob Seiner way of looking at it, right? On the other side, of course, is as a John Ladley side of looking at it, which is you're there to change some things because obviously you're not getting the data outcomes that you're looking for. So, there has to be a little bit of a balance there, and you have to know, okay, so what is it that we really need for this organization, and how are we going to go about doing that?
No, yeah, I really love that phrase that you threw out there, like having that mental flexibility, because yeah, some aspects, like you said, can fit very easily, but there's other aspects which you have to maybe change in terms of people, processes. So I really like that phrase, and I think I'm going to steal it for my other conversations moving forward. And to be honest, I mean that was one of the reasons why we started DataQG in the first place, because we
Mhm.
wanted to provide a venue where organizations, leaders, practitioners could share best practices. And
Mhm.
you can sort of hear what's worked well for other organizations and take areas that would appeal and make sense for your own org and industry. And so
Mhm.
that brings me to a question I'd love to ask you, Todd. So, in terms of your engagement with us, maybe what sort of benefits are you hoping to drive within your organization, within your teams? If you wouldn't mind talking about that, that would be great.
Right. Well, the benefits of organizations like DataQG are immeasurable, really. It is a forum for being able to, reach out to other people and hear what their experiences are. And once you understand what their experiences are, it gives you that mental flexibility. It's like, oh, okay, so it doesn't really have to be, like, XYZ, because, someone else approached a very similar problem in a different way. There is no way that you can do this alone. You have to have the wisdom of the crowd, the advice of others that have followed some very similar circumstances that you may have experienced, and have approached things in a way that you may not have known or may not have thought of. It just wasn't even a consideration. So, groups like this, organizations like, DataQG, really give you that, benefit of perspective, that can give you some of that mental flexibility. So yeah, it's absolutely priceless. And what I hope to get from this for my team, is very much the same thing. They're very intelligent, very talented people, experienced. Some are less experienced than others. I want them to get that benefit of looking at the way other people have tackled problems, how they've shown value. I don't want them to get it just for me. I want them to grow and to excel and to take over for me at some point. You got to hand it off. You got to make your team sufficient and able to grow and expand and show even more value and operate when you're gone, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And no, I think that's a great thought. I mean, because unless you sort of build up the team around you, uh,
Mm,
and they sort of go out and sort of evangelize the need for data governance with the folks that they're talking to, you can get that network effect. So I think that's a great insight. I mean, from my end. Uh, and one, so this has been a great conversation, Todd. I mean,
thank you.
again, thank you for taking the time. And in conclusion, I had just one last question for you. I mean, in terms of advice that you'd like to give to someone who's trying to get their data governance project off of the ground, or I should say
Mm,
more of a program off of the ground, what would
right.
be the best advice that you could possibly think of?
Take advantage of what's around you. Use everything you can to your best advantage. Don't leave any stones unturned. If there is someone that you can think of that can possibly help support you upward, um, take advantage of them as much as possible. I mean, respectfully, of course. Um, Show value as quickly as you can and as much as you can. Even if you're in an odd circumstance where there's just too much coming at you at one time, your demand will soon outstrip your supply, your ability to supply. Um, Find something that shows the most value for the most people and focus on that. Make sure it's not the hardest thing. Find something easy, something relatively easy, relatively simple, straightforward. Show some value in it, and again, have that mental flexibility. What worked for one organization may not work for another. Um, One of the things that I do is I have in my back pocket that I keep, just as a continual set of observations, is something like a 3C observation. So culture, how does the organization operate? Who makes decisions? Who is the most effective at executing their decisions? How is the work funded? That's a big one, especially if you're an organization that needs to capitalize all of their expenses. How do you execute on initiatives as they've been funded? The other C is collaborative capacity. How well do people within the organization collaborate with each other? Are there a lot of roadblocks? Are they resistant to performing work that they can't put under some sort of work code? Um, you know, are they Do they have the tools to collaborate effectively? How much of an infrastructure do you need to build to provide that collaborative capacity? The third one is change management capacity. How easily does the organization change? How do they accept new realities and execute and pivot on those new realities? It goes deeper than just how do you create like an ITIL change in a change management application. It's like a ticketing application or something like that. It's more the company culture that supports that change management, because again, a lot of the things that you're going to encounter, they're people in process that provide poor data outcomes, and it's people in process that's going to support positive data outcomes, right? So how does the organization change to support a change in a business process to create a positive data outcome, right? So those are the things that you might want to keep in your back pocket to get an understanding of, okay, so where are my challenges, and how am I going to, attack those challenges, to get to someplace, where you can, overcome those challenges, then go on to the next challenge, then on to the next challenge. So those are your constraints. How can you start attacking those constraints that will impact those 3Cs, right? So if I were to give, one piece of advice, it's, or actually it's several, but related pieces of advice. It's, show value, have that mental flexibility, start attacking those 3Cs that will, help you to, understand what your constraints are, get those constraints out of the way. That way you improve all of those 3Cs, right?
That's great advice. And I hadn't heard the 3Cs reference before, but as you talked through it, it made a lot of sense. So I think that's a great sort of note to end our interview today, Todd. I think we've just started to scratch the surface about data governance. I'd love for us to continue the conversation and maybe have like a follow-up session to this, because I feel like we could easily spend another hour talking about this particular area.
I'd be happy to.
Excellent.
I can
Thanks so
talk
much.
all day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barath. I appreciate it.